Ever heard of a single person taking on an entire country's bank and winning? It sounds like something out of a movie, right? But in 1992, one man, George Soros, did just that. He famously broke the Bank of England, walking away with over $1 billion in profit. Today, we're diving into the incredible story of Black Wednesday, a day that reshaped financial history and turned Soros into a legend. How did he pull it off? What were the dominoes that had to fall for this to happen? And what were the consequences for millions of ordinary people? Stick around, because this story is a masterclass in strategy, risk, and the raw power of the financial markets. To understand how Soros broke the Bank of England, we first need to travel back to 1990. Europe was on a path toward greater unity, and a key part of that was creating a single currency, what we now know as the euro, as a stepping stone. Many countries joined something called the exchange rate mechanism, or ERM. Think of the ERM as a club for currencies. The goal was to keep the value of each member's currency stable against the others, especially against the strongest currency in the group, the German Deutschmark. For the United Kingdom, joining the ERM was seen as a way to fight inflation and bring economic stability. They locked the British pound to the Deutschmark at a specific rate, about 2.95 marks to £1. The government and the Bank of England promised to do whatever it took to keep the pound at that value, no matter what. They were essentially drawing a line in the sand and daring anyone to cross it. This promise, this unwavering commitment, would soon become their greatest vulnerability. At the time, Britain was struggling. The country was in a recession, unemployment was high, and the economy was weak. To prop up the value of the pound and keep it within the ERM's required range, the UK had to keep its interest rates high. But high interest rates are like a brake on the economy. They make it expensive for businesses to borrow money to grow and for people to get mortgages. So, the UK was caught in a classic dilemma. To honor its commitment to the ERM, it had to maintain policies that were hurting its own domestic economy. It was like trying to run a marathon with weights tied to your ankles. Meanwhile, on the other side of the English Channel, Germany was dealing with its own unique situation. After the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, East and West Germany reunified. This was a massive undertaking. To rebuild the East German economy, the German government started spending huge amounts of money. This massive spending spree led to fears of inflation. To combat this, Germany's central bank, the Bundesbank, did what central banks do. It raised interest rates. Suddenly, the German Deutschmark became even more attractive to investors. Money started flowing into Germany to take advantage of these high interest rates, pushing the value of the Deutschmark up. And here's where the problem started for Britain. Because the pound was pegged to the mark, as the mark got stronger, the pound was supposed to get stronger too. But Britain's weak economy couldn't support a strong currency. The peg of 2.95 marks to the pound started to look artificially high, completely out of step with economic reality. It was like a balloon being held underwater. The natural pressure was for it to rise to the surface, but the ERM was holding it down. Many traders and economists started to whisper that this situation was unsustainable. The British government couldn't keep hurting its own economy with high interest rates forever just to defend an arbitrary exchange rate. Sooner or later, something had to give. This is where George Soros and his legendary quantum fund enter the picture. Soros was not just a trader. He was a financial philosopher. He had a theory called reflexivity, which, in simple terms, suggests that investors' perceptions and the actual fundamentals of an economy can influence each other in a feedback loop. He saw the tension between Britain's political promise to the ERM and its economic reality. He believed the market's perception that the pound was overvalued would become a self-fulfilling prophecy. He and his chief strategist, Stanley Druckenmiller, started to build a massive bet against the British pound. This wasn't a small trade. They were quietly borrowing billions of pounds and immediately selling them for German Deutschmarks. The logic was simple. If and when the UK was forced to devalue the pound, they could buy back those pounds at a much cheaper price, repay their loan, and pocket the difference. Soros wasn't alone. Many other hedge funds and speculators saw the same opportunity. They all started selling the pound in a coordinated, albeit independent, attack. The selling pressure was immense. Imagine a dam with a small crack. Soros and the other speculators were hammering away at that crack, trying to make it bigger. The Bank of England was on the other side, desperately trying to patch it up. As the selling intensified, the value of the pound started to drop, getting dangerously close to the lower limit allowed by the ERM. The UK government was now forced to act on its promise to defend the pound at any cost. This all came to a head on Wednesday, September 16, 1992, a day that would forever be known as Black Wednesday. The day began with a tidal wave of selling. The Bank of England stepped in, using its foreign currency reserves to buy up billions of pounds, trying to push the price back up. It was like trying to hold back the ocean with a bucket. For every pound the Bank of England bought, speculators like Soros sold 10 more. The market's belief that the pound would fall was now overwhelming. By mid-morning, with the pound still falling, the British government made a desperate move. They announced an interest rate hike from 10% to 12%. This was a shocking move, designed to make holding pounds more attractive and to signal their absolute resolve. But the market barely blinked. The selling continued. Soros and his fund reportedly increased their position, sensing that this was a move born of desperation, not strength. A few hours later, in an act of sheer panic, the government announced another, even more dramatic plan. Interest rates would be raised again, to 15%. This was a massive shock to the system, a move that would have crippled the British economy if sustained. But it was too late. The credibility of the government was shattered. The market called their bluff. They knew that a country in a deep recession could not possibly sustain 15% interest rates for long. The pain would be too great for homeowners, businesses, and the unemployed. The speculators held their ground and continued to sell. Soros had correctly predicted that the political will to inflict that much pain on the British people would crumble before the financial pressure. He understood that the Bank of England's promise was, in the end, just words. By the evening of Black Wednesday, the British government was defeated. They had spent billions of pounds of their reserves and had nothing to show for it. The pound was still under relentless attack. At 7:30 p.m., the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Norman Lamont, stood before the cameras and made a stunning announcement. The United Kingdom would be withdrawing from the exchange rate mechanism. They would no longer defend the pound. They were surrendering. The moment the announcement was made, the floor fell out from under the pound. It plummeted in value against the Deutschmark and the US dollar. For George Soros and his quantum fund, this was the moment of victory. They had borrowed billions of pounds when they were valuable and now could buy them back for a fraction of the cost. The profit from this single trade was estimated to be over $1 billion. In one day, George Soros had become the man who broke the Bank of England. The total bet against the pound from his fund was around $10 billion, a staggering sum that overwhelmed the defenses of a major global economy. The aftermath was complex. For the UK, exiting the ERM was humiliating. It was a major political failure and led to a loss of face on the international stage. The government's economic credibility was in tatters. But here's the ironic twist. Being forced out of the ERM turned out to be a blessing in disguise for the British economy. Freed from the straitjacket of maintaining an overvalued currency, the Bank of England could finally cut interest rates. The cheaper pound also made British exports more competitive. The UK economy, which had been struggling, began a long period of recovery and growth. Some even renamed Black Wednesday White Wednesday in hindsight, arguing it was the beginning of Britain's economic revival. For George Soros, the event cemented his status as a financial titan, but it also made him a highly controversial figure. To some, he was a genius, a brilliant strategist who exposed a fatal flaw in the system and held policymakers accountable. He simply saw the economic truth and acted on it. To others, he was a ruthless speculator, a villain who profited from a nation's misfortune and gambled with the livelihoods of ordinary people. The debate continues to this day. Was he a market visionary or a predator? The story of Black Wednesday shows that in the high-stakes world of global finance, the line between the two can be incredibly thin. It's a powerful reminder that behind the abstract numbers and charts of the market, there are real-world consequences and human stories. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the events that shaped our world. See you in the next video.